getting more and more angry and more resilient and more willing to fight back against Putin when people are seeing what he's doing to everyday lives of our citizens. I was at home. I was literally about to make my coffee, and as I raised my hand, I realized that the lights switched off. So A, I could make my coffee, B, I didn't have electricity for 10 hours after that. And with the no electricity, I also didn't have any water. And what is even worse, because everything was down, I also hardly had any internet at all. So that basically meant I couldn't work properly because I rely on internet for doing my job. So that lasted in my area quite a long period of time. I think this area was most badly hit is in the north of Kiev. 10 hours without electricity, water and internet.
It must have been very difficult for you. And how much of the rest of the capital was affected as badly as you were?
Well, early on, they published some information that about 350,000 households have been very badly affected. They did fix the electricity and water in some of the houses by lunchtime. But in the area where I live, which is called Obolon, which is again in the north, that lasted much longer. But it's a very highly populated area. So if you think about 350,000 households, at least 2 people in those, plus businesses, which of course couldn't operate, like supermarkets, cafes, everything, all of that was just shut down for basically the whole day on the north of Kiev. The other parts of Kiev were doing okay. They lasted through the day, but from what I'm reading now is some people have outages right now in the evening.
And presumably this has had some pretty serious consequences for some people if they are elderly, frail, ill, medical facilities and so on.
Yeah, indeed. I've actually, now that I have internet, I was reading about what was happening throughout the day, and apparently some of the hospitals were badly hit. Some of the hospitals were doing surgeries in the morning when this happened. Many of them have generators, but it now is obvious that we're going to need more of those. And I think that would be one of the calls for help for the world is to send us more of those generators, because I think that this, unfortunately, would be a regular occurrence to all of us.
It appears that the Russian forces have deliberately targeted power stations, water supplies and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And they have been doing it since early October. So the first big attack on energy infrastructure happened on October 10th. And now we are October 31st. So, 20 days with temporary outages, blackouts in Kiev and in other parts of Ukraine. They're doing it on purpose because they do believe that this way they will, A, be able to show to the domestic audience in Russia that they are strong, they could do at least something, while their army cannot really show any results on the battlefield. So instead they attack civilian population. But also B, there is a mistaken belief among Putin and his cronies that this will push Ukrainians to ask for the president and the leadership of the country to negotiate with Putin. But he's so badly mistaken in that, because from what I'm reading, I'm hearing from everybody is getting more and more angry and more resilient and more willing to fight back against Putin when people are seeing what he's doing to everyday lives of our citizens.
Because presumably President Putin's calculation is that this will damage the morale of the Ukrainian people, that will hit the resolve of them as they try to dig in for what could be a very long and difficult winter.
Yeah, I believe that is his thinking. But again, just like he believes that he will take over Kiev in 3 days, he's so badly mistaken in that, because what people are doing is they're buying power banks, they're thinking of buying generators if they live in individual houses, they're preparing for the winter, but not a single person is saying, yeah, we have to make a deal and to give up some of the territories just to make it stop. For multiple reasons. A, everybody is really, really angry about this happening. And when you're angry, you don't want to deal with a person who is making you feel this pain and inconveniences and all of that. But also B, because nobody trusts Putin. No matter what deal we make with him, he's going to break the rules. So making a deal, and it's obvious to everybody in Ukraine right now, just makes no sense. So the only thing we need to do is to brace ourselves for winter, which is going to be extremely, extremely difficult. But prepare for that and continue to help Ukrainian army to fight back on the battlefield.
The Russians have blamed Ukraine for the attack on the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. Have Ukrainian forces been directly attacking the Russians in that area, in Crimea, in the Black Sea ports?
Well, as you well know, Ukrainian forces do not confirm this information. But what we can definitely state is that the Russian fleet is located there illegally because they annexed Crimea. And now any attempt on our side to take back our territory, they claim that we are at fault for that. While the initial sin was them taking Crimea and locating their military bases there. That is what Putin should be discussing. So, he will be using any type of fight back or any type of defense on the Ukrainian side, and we are only defending our own country and our own territory and our people. He will say that, Ukraine is at fault for that, but we are not. We are within our right to protect our territory and our people.
So any attack on the Russian forces there, in your view, in Ukraine's view, would be justified?
Well, it's our territory, and they decided to put their military bases there. I think it's obvious for any country. If if Russia invaded, any part of any country, that country would be saying we want our territory back, and then the fact that Russian military bases are located there is just illegal, and it's not according to the international rules and international principles. And that is what is at stake here: is whether we respect the very idea of sovereignty. Because if we don't respect it in case of Ukraine, then who is to say that something similar won't happen in other cases? I do believe that the principle is at stake here, not just the matter of Ukraine and territory.
Russia has now pulled out of this deal, which was to allow ships carrying grain from Ukrainian ports, although I'm seeing reports that some ships have still been able to leave. What can you tell us about the status of that deal and what's happening with those grain supplies which for so long were blockaded in Ukrainian ports?
Yeah, indeed. What has happened is that yesterday evening they said that they are planning to withdraw from the grain deal because of the so-called attacks on the Russian fleet by Ukrainian side. But the thing is that they were just looking for an excuse to get away from this. And they could have found any other type of excuse because they couldn't have made it up because they really wanted out. So right now the situation is the following. The ships have still left Ukrainian ports and they're heading to, towards within the Black Sea, towards the stretch. And that is being negotiated with Turkey and with the United Nations without any agreement on the Russian side. So we'll see how that will go. I very much hope we would be able to deliver the grains that we promised to the countries on the brink of hunger, and that Russia will not attack the ships with grain. But if they do, I very much hope that the countries that urgently need that grain will understand who is at fault there and who is denying them grains that they so very badly need. Because unfortunately, Russian propaganda in African countries, which most of that grain is designated for, is extremely strong. But I think it's time for them to understand who makes them suffer and who denies them the fruit that they're willing to buy and pay for.
Because there are countries, particularly parts of Africa, which really rely on these grain exports. But of course, it's also vital for Ukraine, isn't it, that it is able to get these supplies out?
Yeah, indeed, because we are a huge agricultural country. Agriculture is a huge part of our economy. And the fact that we couldn't sell our grain was also, of course, very bad for us. Because if our farmers cannot sell their grains this year, they have to store them somewhere, and we don't have the storage capacity for this, amount of grain. Because of course we have been selling that to other countries all the time. B, they also wouldn't have the liquidity; they wouldn't have the money to buy to prepare for the next harvest. And then we will run into an even deeper hole where we wouldn't even produce grains for the next season. And I think that is something that the whole world is interested in preventing from happening.
Just finally, let me ask you, as you I'm sure know, we have a new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He's spoken to President Zelensky. He's pledged the UK's continuing support. How important do you think it is that Britain does continue to the role which very much began under Boris Johnson, particularly as you approach this very difficult winter that we've been talking about?
Well, I understand there are different opinions about the current or the previous leadership inside the United Kingdom, and of course the country is within its right to evaluate its leaders. But from Ukraine's perspective, Boris Johnson did a great job in driving support, international support for Ukraine. He was the major voice on the global scene, speaking in favor of supporting Ukraine. And we, of course, very much hope that other leaders, including the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will continue doing that. Because trust me, that was so much appreciated by Ukrainians. Ukrainians loved Boris Johnson for that. I've been telling the stories many times. One of the bakeries in Kiev have created a bakery thingy, croissant type of thing, but not really croissant. We called it Boris Johnson because it looked similar to Boris Johnson with his characteristic hair and all of that. It doesn't have hair; it just has some other stuff. But that is just for you to understand to what extent he became a popular figure here. And right now, this bakery actually made some other baked sweet thing and called it Rishi Sunak. So he really should come and taste it and visit Ukraine. And I believe he, as any leader in the UK, understands that we do share common interests here. We do share common values. And that is what we need to continue fighting for.